horsepower Taylor craft. Didn't have any brakes, didn't have a tail wheel, all it had was a skid on the back. It was an old airplane, but I learned to fly that way before World War II. And so I had a little bit of a bulge on everybody when World War II came along. They had a pilot's exam came out during World War II. I volunteered for it. My parents didn't want me to. I was only 17 at the time. So I finally worked up a deal with them. They said, if you pass the test given by the Air Force, we'll go ahead and sign the papers, you can join. So they didn't think I could make it. Well, I got the second highest grade in the class. So fooled them. They had what they call a CPTP, Civil Pilot Training Program. This is for guys who couldn't afford to learn how to fly, who wanted to be in the Air Corps later on, but didn't want to do it. But they were willing to get in the Air Force, but the Air Force wanted them to be a certain grade, so they had to take a test in order to get high enough to get in the Air Force as cadets. And that's when I got in. Well, I got there in May of 1965, and the country was almost cut in two by the Viet Cong. They'd get and clear up to Keelung, or not Keelung, Ban Me Tuot, and they'd almost cut the country in two. And the day after I got there, they shipped in, I think, 30,000 Marines, and they went over and they just kicked daylights out of the Viet Cong. In the air, I never worried at all. Same way with World War II, there was never any doubt in my invincibility. In January of 1968, the North Communists, the North Vietnamese Communists, moved their whole army. It's the first time their army, the real army, had ever gotten into action. They came down south and made a bunch of strikes on Hue Phu Bai and Da Nang and around there, and then moved on further south. And there was a good fight. And in the process, we just about wiped out the Vietnamese army. But all the reporters who were there, all I could do was cry about all the Americans who were getting killed. Good Lord, in a war you expect to have losses. The army wouldn't fire so high without letting people know, and if it went above a certain elevation, then they would tell all the pilots in the area what was going on. It was decided between France and Vietnam that it used to be called Indochina, as a matter of fact, before they called it Vietnam's. And they had Indochina, Cochin China, and various other things around there. Anyway, the United States got involved with it because they were an ally of France, and France did not want to give up Vietnam as a colony. And the Vietnamese wanted to rebel, they wanted to get away, so they started the war. I guess you could say they started the war. They wanted to become free, so they started fighting for themselves, and they were kicking the daylights out of the French. And we started helping the French, and that's how we sent advisors over that went to Laos initially. And then they gradually filtered over into every place. But that's how we got in. The Mutual Assistance Treaty. In case somebody should invade the United States, they would help us. If somebody would invade them, we would help them. That's exactly what happened. North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam, which is a violation of the treaty, so we lived up to it and moved over to help them. After World War II, Ho Chi Minh was on our side, and he wanted us to support him. We did support him to a degree. And then when North Vietnam decided when Vietnam period decided they wanted to be free, they split more or less into two parts, North and South. Ho Chi Minh was the leader in the North. They had they did have I've forgotten the name of the guy who was the premier down south. He was no good. It was I'm sorry, I should have looked it up. Anyway, there was a man down south who was backed by the French, who ran the South Vietnam as Ho Chi Minh ran north. And the two of them didn't get along together. They decided on a split deal where there would be north and south, and whoever wanted to could leave north and go south, or south and go north. I think we covered that pretty well. But we were allied with the government of South Vietnam because when Eisenhower sent the advisors over, the French and the Vietnamese had a treaty. They went to Paris to sign it. And one of the upshots of the treaty was splitting Vietnam in half. They split it up 38th parallel. North of that was Viet Cong, it was communist, and south of it was free Vietnam. Anybody who wanted to was welcome to go. They had a time period, but about 30 or 60 days. Said if anybody in South Vietnam wants to go north, do it. If anybody in North Vietnam wants to go south, do it. And North Vietnam was almost depopulated. Then I couldn't tell the Vietnamese what we were doing. They were our allies and everything, but if you told the Vietnamese anything, 10 minutes later the Viet Cong would have everything that was possible to knock it off. So we couldn't tell the Vietnamese anything. Premier Key used to chew me out all the time because I wouldn't tell him. I liked him. I think he's a good old boy. I was all for him, but he had a point and we had a point. I told him security was no good. And he said, tell me who's talking and I'll take care of it. Well, we didn't know who was talking. If we told one Vietnamese, 50 more to know about it in 10 minutes. No good. One time it was because the intelligence we had wasn't sufficient to plan a mission properly. I sent people in and the Viet Cong were sitting there waiting for them. And that's bad.